Hey everybody, welcome back to From the Margins with your co-hosts Connor Renfro
and Violet Knight.
Today we're going to be bringing you the finale in our deep exploration into LGBT identity formation through the critical lens of Vivian Cass's Cass model.
Yay finale!
Yay finale! And you better believe we're going to get through it because I am done with this series. I mean,
that's fair.
I enjoy talking about it, but editing it is really draining.
And as much as we have enjoyed recording the series, I feel like we've really explored in terms of our own selves a lot of the different things it has to offer. So I think if we are going to discuss this topic more, it needs to come at a later date.
Yeah, exactly. But since we gave ourselves the framework of the Cass model, we gave ourselves an easy out by explaining these last two steps. Are you ready,
Lovely.
Violet?
Let's do it, Connor.
All right. So last time we left you with identity acceptance, the part in the formation where the individual has finally come to terms with it. And now we're going to talk about the fifth step, identity pride. And we all know pride, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we absolutely know pride.
Right. Like maybe Violet and I don't know pride because we have no dignity and we are like sluts on the internet.
Oh.
But
only for married people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
Right, but like we as a culture are very familiar with the idea of gay pride, lesbian pride, bi pride, trans pride, right? Like the parades that happen every year in June.
Of course. I think on the last episode I told my story about going to my first ever one.
You sure did.
Yay.
It was a beautiful story. So
Thank
now
you.
let's talk about the fifth step in the Cass model, which deals with pride. So at this stage, somewhere in between acceptance and pride comes the dreaded coming out of the closet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So at this point, and okay, so quick note, we've said this in every other episode, but just because we have to be, we have to have integrity in our discussion. This model comes from the 70s, and it was about purely homosexual not relationships, but homosexual identity. Violet is not homosexual, nor am I.
Nope. Though I am pan.
Violet is pan. I am bisexual. Violet is also trans.
What?
Oh,
It's the first time hearing about it.
sorry to let you know this, but I've decided that
I've got some phone calls to make.
I've decided that you are transgender now.
Okay, cool.
I'm
Good for you.
diagnosing you. Anyway.
No.
With my authority.
Oh.
So neither of us is homosexual, and yet I, for one, find that there's a lot of overlap in this experience, despite being 30 years later. Well, 40 years now. Oh my God, 50 years. We're in the 20s now. Oh my God.
Ooh, that's true.
Whoa, brain blown.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, and all right, so homosexual identity pride. This is when they start coming out of the closet. There's also a duality to their world now, where they're seeking out other gays to spend their time with. Right?
Right.
There's an us versus them. There's a duality of gay versus straight, where gay is everything that is good and straight is everything that is bad. So when I read this breakdown of what's happening in the pride stage, a lot of it has to do with what I think is like a response to what's actually happening in their lived experience, where they're having to redraw a lot of lines in their lives.
Right.
Because Violet and I have both already shared our coming out stories. And so a lot of that meant losing people who were close to us, redefining relationships under new boundaries, but also finding new communities as well.
That's true.
Right? Like you meet new friends when you like engage in the LGBT community. And their experiences are much more similar to yours, maybe.
Right.
Viewpoints can be very similar. if they've had more experience than you, then they can be like good mentors. I can't help but think of also like the dangers and the drama that comes in predatory spaces, unfortunately.
And that's true, because as much as we hate to admit it, sometimes that can be the reality.
Yeah, but so the psychosocial response to these changes is like kind of like a hunkering down in your identity. You're like, I'm here, I'm queer, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm super gay. Gay used to be a slur, but I've reclaimed it, and I'm gay, and everything that is good is gay. That fictional character, gay. This song I like, gay. You're gay too. Be my boyfriend.
That's how it works, folks. If a gay tags you, that's how you become gay.
I caught it. See, I got tagged by a gay man and a straight woman at the same time, and that's why I'm bi.
I was bitten by an unvaccinated little girl. Vaccinate your kids.
So, now, this isn't mentioned in the Wikipedia article that I'm using as a reference because I'm so scholarly, but I did get training, like leadership training, in safe spaces at my undergraduate university. And it occurred to me then that so many of the queer people were still staunchly rooted in their pride stages of development. If you can simplify human experience to 6 steps, then everybody was still deep in their pride stage, like walking around in rainbow tees, waving flags, arguing for their ability to like be anywhere they wanted, while also saying, this is a quarantined gay only space, no hets allowed.
Connor, may I bring up a point about that before we continue?
Yes, please do.
I think this is also a point we need to mention. One of the failings of the caste model is that because it is a linear structure model, it doesn't take into the account of like social stigma or cultural differences that go into the identity formation process. And remembering that Connor and I went to undergraduate in South Carolina, a lot of the students, probably this was their first ever time feeling even remotely comfortable to explore their pride. Or even like some of them, it probably was their first time even coming out to themselves in college. So it's not too surprising that in college we would see that kind of a boom.
No, of course not. That's not surprising at all. In fact, it is the college experience that lends itself. And I mean, let's not give this model is a theoretical framework in the first place. It's not meant to like divide all life into these 6 stages. This is just like noted, observed trends in identity formation.
Exactly.
For how many times can I say this? Specifically homosexual people.
Right. Also, I do also want to point out, if at any point Connor or I mention something that doesn't really line up with your personal experience or people you know, also all of our experiences are very subjective, and they're each, we're going to have some different sort of jumping around within our own identities in terms of how we explore ourselves and how we define ourselves. So I just want to put that asterisk out there for the sake of also having integrity in that regard.
Right. I mean, don't ever feel invalidated by this discussion.
Oh God, no.
Which is what I tried to circumvent by putting all of these disclaimers in front of every single sentence I say.
Right.
Everybody's unique. These are trends, but I find it useful for my own purposes.
Right. It's a really good model to work off of for the sake of talking about.
And as a self-hating gay myself, with a lot of internalized homophobia, biphobia, I've always been very resentful of people who were in the pride stage. This is my hot take. This is what makes me problematic.
Gotcha.
But this is also my podcast that I share with Violet. My views do not reflect her views. And she's very welcome to call me out and tell me I'm being problematic. But I do have to share my experience. And I do have to, come to terms with some things. I hinted to this in the last episode. So, spoiler alert, the last stage in the caste model is synthesis, where your gay identity is not the most important thing about you anymore. It's just one aspect of your character. And I like to believe that I skipped Pride and went straight into that, because I always had this narrative about myself where it's like, oh yeah, I came to terms with it. I'm okay. I'm good. I went straight from acceptance to synthesis because I didn't have to broadcast it everywhere. But the truth is, I don't know if I ever left acceptance. Maybe I'm still in that stage and I just never reached Pride. Because my first thought, which is very problematic, was like, I hated all of the specifically gay men who just like seemed to be trapped in their Pride stage, and they were just like waving their pride around in my face. And I'm like, yeah, I'm queer too. I just don't make a big deal about it. But I also wonder if that's like a lot of internalized shame inside of me as well. It is very possible.
It's very possible.
And I also don't really know. This isn't like a fully formed thing that I have a language for yet, so I don't want to waste too much time talking about it. But I did want to take this moment to share that I'm not really quite sure where there's still shame and where there's still like a hang up, and like, even if I've accepted in myself, why can't I take pride in it? Why am I so alienated from my own sexuality?
Right.
So I hate pride parades. I hate pride festivals with a passion.
Really?
Because, well, I hate crowds, and I hate being trapped outside in the summer with a bunch of people and with a lot of like capitalist brands rainbow washing, pink washing themselves for like corporate sponsorships. And I try to tell myself that's the sole reason.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of things that make like any kind of festival unappealing to me. But there's also like just so many naked people just like displaying their sex everywhere. And I mean, I know I'm a huge prude. As many like degenerate jokes as I make on air, I'm actually a huge prude. Maybe I'm just really repressed, and both parts of me are true, my degeneracy and my prudishness. But it just makes me kind of like uncomfortable and a little angry, where I'm like, there's more to being gay than just having sex with the same gender and not wearing clothes in public, you know? But there's also like a lot of sadness in the gay community. I mean, we're still reckoning with like the AIDS epidemic and the lost history and just years of marginalization and state-sanctioned genocide against us. And I've internalized a lot of that. And I look at the people who have weaponized their sex and they're living out loud and proud as a way to like carve out a space. And like a part of me recognizes they're pioneers, and it's like, we had to fight and die to earn this, so we're going to enjoy it. And, you know, I try to keep that in mind, but I also hope that we can move past it and have like a great big identity synthesis movement soon. So yes, cancel me in the comments, lambast me, make all publicity is good publicity, tell all of your friends that I'm awful.
Connor, I do want to circle back and provide my own thoughts about the idea of pride parades, if you don't mind.
Unbury me from this shithole I just dug myself into.
It's more so, while I don't want to detract from any of your points, because I think there exists a very interesting, I think by even exposing this sort of darkness you feel toward pride parades, I think we're actually getting some sort of perspective about your struggle itself, and I want to get more information on that, but really I don't know how to progress through with it right now. Basically, I feel like by even admitting that, you're telling us something more about your own struggle with your sexuality.
Probably.
But before we get into that, I just want to mention, you used the phrase weaponized their sex. I wrote it down just so I didn't forget it. I really never see it as weaponizing. Granted, I can see how you would take that approach with it, given everything you just said, but I'll be the first to admit, I also still have a lot of internalized transphobia that I direct inward. I direct so much of it inward. I don't direct it outward like everybody else. I try to be as supportive as I can, but I never give myself the same break that I give everybody else. And when I think of pride parades, yes, there's nudity. Yes, there's like a lot of like flamboyancy associated with all of it. And granted, the corporate sponsorships, that's a whole different take that I have thoughts on too. But I always see it as sort of I see it as a coming together and a celebration of this unity of the identity to say, hey, as isolated as we've all felt at some point in our identity synthesis, whether it be you're an older LGBT member who had to undergo the horrors of the AIDS epidemic without even getting any recognition from the government, in being completely torn apart by the media and social life and the conservative idea of what AIDS meant, or whether you're still a baby gay now and you're just now coming to terms with your identity. It kind of is a good way to take a step back and be like, hey, we've all been afraid, and that's why we're here together, just to remind each other, you don't have to go through this alone. And that's what I take away from Pride parades. And yeah, they're crowded, and also they're in June, and I hate the heat, but it's just a nice way to come back to your own roots and say, you know what, as much as I feel alone, I'm not actually alone, and that we have earned this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that, and I never meant to imply otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that I don't feel like a part of the community.
Would you like to explore that, or would you like to talk
I
about
mean,
that
I'll just say
further?
that I hate men.
Gotcha.
Especially the gay scene in New York is so toxic and awful. And they're all just like so sex crazed. Okay, no, I'm painting with like such broad strokes. I mean, I think there is a real issue that I'm not prepared to tackle right now. And I've actually talked with many people about it. And I think there's like a huge consciousness eruption coming now that we have a new language. And I think it's just growing pains in the community. Unfortunately, I've never felt a part of the community. And maybe that would do something to alleviate my shame if I felt like if a community even existed in the first place.
Connor, do you own anything rainbow whatsoever?
No.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm not gay. I'm bi.
Well, I mean,
And I used to have a bi flag, but I lost it.
I mean, rainbow is kind of like the catch-all.
Yeah, but I hate rainbows. Even devoid of like their meaning with like gay, I've never liked rainbows.
Gotcha.
Easter is my least favorite holiday just because I hate Easter eggs. I hate the colors of them.
You're a neutral tone man.
Yeah, I like darker, more neutral. Wow, I took this to a dark place. I have a lot of like deep-seated antipathy that I didn't mean to like unleash, but I'm feeling it now, and maybe I need to go back to analysis.
I agree. Do we want to take a pause in this episode?
No, I'm ready to keep moving unless you need a pause.
So, continuing forward. So what does that mean exactly for the identity synthesis? I know that you talked about your feelings toward pride parades and the commercialization and the crowds, and just you feel, did I hear you correctly when you say you feel that there is a lack of like a true community?
Yeah, I think that okay, and this is like actually specific to the pride thing, where it's like people who are just now coming to terms with their sexuality seek out other people who are like them.
Mm-hmm.
And they create these communities.
Right.
And at this stage in your development, that's enough, right? It's enough that all you share is this one identity aspect, which, because of the way we're raised and because of the way we're socialized, it does feel like the biggest part of you. It feels all-consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And it does take a lot of time to put it in a context. Like, you do have to grow up and mature. But as far as this idea of an LGBT community, I mean, even between letters, there's like some hostility. And then that doesn't even talk about like racial divisions, gender divisions, stuff like that, like political divisions, like conservative versus progressive gays.
Right.
So, I mean, there are many communities, but I don't believe in the idea of like one big blanket community. Like, I do not believe that an entire demographic forms a community.
Right. I understand.
Like, that's just identity fetishization under neoliberalism.
May I respond to that?
Go for it.
I think you're right that there are going to be holes in every aspect of the LGBT identity, in terms of there's going to be divisions, whether they be political, racial, spiritual in some senses. Like, in terms of everybody being LGBT, I know that I'm very hyper aware of, TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminists who, many of which identify as LGBT themselves, not exclusively, mind you, but I know many who do. And there is something that hurts particularly bad about those who do identify as like lesbian or bi or like pan, who would then have that kind of a perspective, because it feels like almost being attacked from within. But I think by having these identities, and even if they are problematic in those regards and they're never going to be fully as congealed or consistent as we want them to be, I think they still serve a very important purpose. Even if it's just talking and combining with your letter and communing with your letter. When I first was trying to come to terms with myself, I really did seek out a lot of transgender people, and I wanted to immerse myself in transgender literature, art, media. I was like voraciously consuming anything I could find related to transgender people, because I just needed to know that it was possible to be successful and safe in the world while being transgender. And I think that's the ultimate point of having these communities in the first place, is even though they are by no means perfect in the slightest, like there is still so much that we've got to like solve as part of the community ourselves, if we can even still call it, like you said, a community. I think it still provides a microcosm of the world itself that's a tiny bit safer in some regard for people to incubate and foster their identity and fortify themselves until they're strong enough to face it on their own. Like, it's not that it's going to be a perfect community so much as it's just marginally safer than the world at large. And that's its biggest takeaway. Like, the fact that somebody who is still trying to find themselves can immerse themselves in this identity, and everybody there on some level is going to even be the slightest bit more accepting than just going through it on your own with cishet people.
Right, I agree with all of that. I just also think that I agree with everything you said. I do think a lot of it does come from the pride stage of the caste model, and it does come from like a need for, and then I'm going to talk about the caste model specifically, and then I'm going to talk about my experience.
Go for it, please.
And in the caste model, like gay men, once they finally accepted it and they begin to come out and they take pride in it, like the model says that they seek out these communities, they seek out similar people, they split the world into gay versus straight. And I know that's true. I saw it happen at Winthrop. I see it happen here. But my experience as a bisexual person is that everybody always wanted to erase me. As a bisexual man, I could hang out with gay men who told me that, oh, you're just in an in-between stage waiting to go full gay. And also they all just wanted to like bag me. And then I could hang out with straight people who also wouldn't really, right, because I didn't have like an us versus them, because every community felt kind of a little bit exclusionary. Like, I never actually felt safe in a gay space. Not safe, but like I never felt fully included. It's like for me to join their ranks, I would have to be disingenuous. Like, was I still allowed to go to the GSA meeting if I had a girlfriend? And many of them would say no. And then, right. So I think I've already like known that like, us versus them mentality is already kind of bad, even though it's very necessary, especially for people who grew up being the them. Mm-hmm. It's always nice to finally get to a stage where you can be part of the us. And so for me to find my us, I had to kind of like form that outside of LG spaces.
Right.
And that might contribute to some of my anger. That might contribute to like my feeling of not even wanting to be included in the first place. There's so many different layers interacting here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I want to be proud, but I think a part of me, and I don't know if it's like a function of shame that's keeping me from being proud, or if it's a function of like I just so badly want to be synthesized that I just like ignore the pride stage altogether and just be like, yeah, I'm just a person. Stop asking about my sexuality. Which again would just be more shame. I'm so used to being erased that I just want to erase myself and not call attention to it at all.
I think that's a very powerful thing to say.
Woof, we got rough. This was supposed to be like the happy conclusion.
Hey, I think this is an important thing to note, though.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about that real shit, and I do absolutely agree that bisexual people get erased more so than any other letter.
Yeah. It struck me when you were talking about trans literature and trans art. And it was like, for me, I don't really know of a lot of bisexual art. I mean, I know Lord Byron was bisexual, but...
Freddie Mercury.
I mean, but that's like music.
Well, it's still art. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's art, but like, I too want to like read books with bisexual male protagonists who deal with my experience.
Right.
Like, I want to see me in TV shows outside of being like a white man.
Right.
Like, it was so powerful to see like gay representation, but now I want to see a man navigate being bisexual.
I think that's a really good point. I can't think of any bisexual characters off the top of my head that are in popular media.
I mean, there's Daryl Whitefeather on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, but he's like a comic relief guy.
Oh.
Who, I don't know, he doesn't actually struggle. And I mean, it's really nice to see like positive bisexual male representation, but I want to see the dark shit. I want to see the struggle. Like, I don't want to watch this grown man date men and women while just being like a nice guy. Like, he's not a slut or anything. He's like a nice man who like falls deeply in love with all of his partners. And it's really nice and really sweet. And but the thing is, like, he's never erased. He comes out and everybody accepts him.
Right.
And it's like, it jumps straight to like the utopian view of it.
Gotcha.
And I want to see people struggle. I want the darkness.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Connor, have you sought out like any sort of bisexual groups?
I don't know where to find them.
That's fair, because really, I can't tell you off the top of my head either. Would you ever be interested?
I once Googled best dating sites for bisexual people, and it just gave me all of the dating apps that already exist.
I understand. I've done the same thing with transgender dating apps, or fetishistic sites. They always send you like to those things where you're fetishized for being trans. But
great, yeah. Unicorn hunters.
Oh my God! If I have one more couple ask, anyway, never mind. No. Oh, Tinder, I'm taking a break. Anyway. Would you ever be interested in seeking out bisexual groups?
I'm not at a point in my life where I want another friend group.
I completely understand.
Like, I'm so beyond being bisexual. Like, I'm celibate now. Not that, like, I need to be celibate to enter gay spaces anyway, but, like, I'm just not interested in sexuality at this moment in my life anymore. I put my toe in the water. It was fine. I just want to get the rest of my life on track.
I understand. Still, it sounds like it is still causing you some sort of lingering pain.
You know, it might be, but it only comes up when I'm confronted with, like, questions like this.
That's fair, and we don't have to talk about it anymore if you don't want to.
Just in the interest of time, let's wrap up synthesis next.
No worries. What do you want to talk about to wrap up synthesis?
Alright, so an introduction into synthesis. I already kind of gave a preview, but that is the point where the person has fully synthesized their homosexuality according to the Cass model.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer the only part of their identity. It's just a part of it. It's like, I am also a member of this ethnic group. I am also a member of this occupation, profession. I have this relationship with these family members and these friends, and I just happen to be gay.
Right.
And that's the part where I sometimes fantasize I'm already there.
Right.
And maybe I am. Like, maybe it's not a linear journey. Like, I'm sure you can, like, cycle through these, you know. Right.
One of the biggest concerns I've heard related to this model is also the fact, because it presents them linearly, it kind of implies that somebody's incomplete, quote unquote, unless they go through all of them, and that ultimately is faulty.
Right.
Everybody's journey is going to be different.
Of course. This is just observed trends from the 70s for specifically gay and lesbian people.
Exactly. And in the 70s, being gay had just been taken out of the DSM.
Right. So what we need is an update to the model.
All right, everybody out there listening, go to college, major in anthropology or sociology, and update this model.
Thank you. Do it for us who have already gotten our masters and doctorates and can't go back and start over.
Do it for the people who you'll never meet that will come after you.
Bless.
Bless.
So do you have any thoughts on synthesis?
Well, I can say that I've done partial synthesis, but as much as I hate to admit it, here's a weird idea that I've not mentioned recently, but I think in some ways I might have relapsed a stage or two. Because being out of the public eye, being so shunned away from, like, society, looking for jobs and being confined to my room because of economic reasons, I think I've almost started, like, being afraid all over again to where I still feel pride, but I've almost, like, become afraid all over again. And I'm having to relearn how to act in spite of that fear. So, synthesis, if I didn't have a list, it'd be easier to say, but synthesis is still something that I'm working on. It's not fully developed, but I've definitely touched it. I'm halfway through. It's like when your laptop goes to sleep halfway through uploading a file and you're like, oh God, did it fully upload or not? And you can't really tell. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm working with.
Yeah, I fantasize about being synthesized and moving on with my life. And maybe I too have like this completionist idea. Mm-hmm. Like I just wanted to already be done with it. But this doesn't have to be a goal. Like, I'm pretty sure plenty of people die at the age of 90 still in their prime
Especially considering how little they had to work with back. Well,
right.
I know this is this feels like a little bit of a weird tone to end things on, but I think it is about a good time to wrap this up.
Okay. But let's say something positive at the very least.
I think that's a good idea. Do you want to go first?
Thank you for listening to our series. This is LGBT or queer identity formation through the cast model, filled with a lot of anecdotes from us. We hope they've made you laugh and cry and grow a little.
Lord knows we've grown a little through just telling the stories. I know I completely revisited memories I hadn't even thought of in a while.
Right. I made a lot of connections. I wrote them all down. I'm going to talk to them about my analyst tomorrow.
Perfect.
So please don't cancel me until I've had a chance to, like, gather myself.
Right.
Or do cancel me. I don't care. I live for it.
Well, everyone out there listening, I just also want to note, some days are really going to be hard, especially if you come from an area or a family doesn't really understand. And I just want to impress upon you, this world will always, always be better with you in it. And you belong here. And you will always belong here. It's going to hurt. Some days are really going to be tough. But we are glad you're here, and I can't wait to meet you whenever you're finally at your synthesis stage. If you ever get there. And if you don't, that's fine too. The important part is be yourself and love yourself. And it takes some work, but it can be done.
And you don't owe anybody anything.
Connor's right.
If you don't like the toxic community you found yourself in, extricate yourself. Find good, wholesome gays to be friends with.
Connor's right, because as much as it really is sad to admit, even in the trans community, I've met more than one person who was less than constructive, and learn to recognize those warning signs when you meet somebody who's going to do more harm than good to you and your understanding of the world.
Your gender and sexual orientation are beautiful parts of yourself, and you should find community there. But again, you don't owe anybody anything, and it's not the only part of you that matters. So don't quench it, don't repress it, accept yourself, and express yourself however you feel safe and comfortable. But love yourself and find people who love you too.
We love you, and we hope you're safe first and foremost.
Accept nothing less than the best.
Connor's right, you deserve the best. Alright, I think we should end it there.
Okay, love you guys.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.